Hey, Mario Petch from Devrix here. Today's topic is failure and failing at job interviews. And most people out there have failed various job interviews throughout their career. And especially for recent graduates and entry level roles, it's extremely hard to actually pass the bar for an interview because you still don't have enough experience, you still don't have the portfolio, and so on and so on and so on. So it may get really demotivating, and some people try to beat themselves up for failing a specific interview or just saying, I'm not worth anything and stuff like that. So I just want to bust some myths with regards to job interviews and to kind of applying for a job and enrolling a job, because a job failure doesn't necessarily mean that you're at fault, right? And to be honest, for the most part, probably over 85% of the times, failing a job interview is more or less outside of your control. It's due to competition. It's due to insufficient experience in that specific field or something like that. Or sometimes it may be lack of culture fit. The fact that you don't match the culture of that specific team doesn't mean that you're at fault. It means that that specific team works in according to different rules and guidelines and regulations and whatever be it. So that's extremely important. So in terms of kind of joining jobs, just applying for jobs and whatnot, I'm a great proponent of avoiding interviews as much as possible. And that's not to say that we don't conduct interviews. What I say is that usually interviews are basically used for two things: making sure that the CV and yada yada is actually correct and it's actually kind of prepared by the specific person, and making sure that the culture is more or less intact, so that particular person isn't way outside of kind of the brackets of what we are expecting from someone to behave in our specific organization. But there are several other things that we're also trying to assess, and for the most part, they can be measured and they can be kind of extracted and used early on, even before the interview phase. Salary expectations obviously is kind of number one. Most people essentially use interviews in order to gauge the salary expectations of a candidate. And it's a tricky bit because instead of everything being as transparent as possible, most people just fall into that trap and they say, yeah, please, they're scheduling an interview, they're leading the entire interview only with the intent to learn that freaking number at the end of the day. And I kind of understand that. It's like selling enterprise services, because if you see a number, listed on the pricing page by a company selling enterprise services, most likely you're not going to call. But if you're already on the phone and you kind of get in touch with a great salesperson, they may actually persuade you and sell you that specific business plan. So for the most part, that's kind of the purpose of having those, designed the way they are currently at the moment. But when you think of it, if you just state your salary expectations in your CV, it gets much better, right? And of course, what we try to do for some of our jobs, we do try to post a specific kind of salary range for that specific role, right? Because we say, like, for example, we do have a PHP developer role open right now, and we say salary starts from this number to that number. It's listed on various different portals. And those are the kind of the job requirements that we're looking for. And of course, if someone is underqualified, they probably won't kind of get the same number. If someone is way overqualified, so underqualified is not going to get that. Overqualified is probably going to get offered kind of a larger pay range if we have the opportunity to do that, and if we're actually looking for someone that senior. And that's kind of how business works. But most people really get stuck on that particular, oh my god, I failed an interview, where again, employers generally try to assess whether your CV is actually the experience that you really have in practice, and kind of your culture. The other elements, of course, salary expectations, or specific experiences that you want to mention that are not suitable for a CV, and so forth, and of course you gouging the company yourself, are kind of the side effects, more or less, that can occur during the interview. Moreover, some of the so again, I'm going to speak from my experience, having conducted probably over 1,000 interviews. most with remote people, because we still have phone calls or even video calls with some of those. So most of the time, it's extremely common actually. Like, people haven't even looked at our website. Like, we do work with two freelance human recruiters in kind of in our field, and we ask them to do field calls before scheduling an interview. So of course, one of the questions is, tell me what you know about the company so that I know where can I start from when I'm kind of doing the brief over the phone, right? And most people are like, who's calling, or what was the name of that company, or I don't know, I kind of submitted 20 CVs elsewhere, so I don't really recall anymore. And I call that the shotgun approach, and I have a few pieces discussing that shortcut approach as well, shotgun approach, sorry, as well. But in a nutshell, that's not really a working model if you want to really make sure that you're a good fit for the culture, because your CV and your portfolio and your background and everything should be tailored to that specific company, right? So you may have a decade of experience, but your CV for a old school corporation and for a startup would be completely different, because old school corporations and high-end enterprise companies and so forth, they care about certificates, about diplomas, about making sure that you can follow a process, making sure that you're diligent and stuff like that. Startups care about accomplishments, about what you've actually done at the job, like what you've attempted to do, some experiments, some failures that you've gone through, things like that. They care a bit more about the practical side. And that's not to say that you can't use the same CV in both cases, but if you adjust that, if you actually tailor that for those specific organizations, you're going to be luckier. And of course, with that in mind, people try to, like, based on our experience, people often apply without knowing what the company does, how the company works. They haven't done the due diligence of the company. So actually failing the interview is something that they have kind of made possible through not knowing where they go. So again, we've had a lot of people basically applying without, like, being a complete non-culture fit. Like, they expect, for example, some fancy office downtown. We have a regular office almost outside of town. They do expect, I don't know, like, just slow working hours, or they just expect getting in the office with everyone else at 8 a.m. Some of our people start work at 1 p.m., right? So they haven't really paid any attention to what we're working on. How are we doing that? What sort of projects are we working on? What sort of technologies even we're using, and so forth, and then applying with us. So that's a problem. Salary expectations again. Like, I love seeing CVs with their salary range, or cover letters, or whatever be it, with like expected salary or something like that. We do even have that bracket in our job application form on our website. And the reason we have it is people may ask for various numbers. We've had people who earn like $500 a month, like living somewhere in Asia, and then applying with us asking for $4,000 a month, right? It's like an 8 times jump from their specific salary. It's like 8 times more than what they're getting right now. So, of course, like, given the right kind of portfolio and experience and yada, 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 we can discuss that number, right? Because with us, it's all about return on investment. But at the end of the day, like, you're not looking for some jump looking like 20%, 30%, 50%. You're looking at 8 times jump, like 700% increase of your existing salary. So obviously there is a mismatch, and it doesn't make sense. Like, even if we do an interview, we hear that number and we say, I'm sorry, that's really outside of our budget. And we've heard people saying, well, I can actually work for a third of that money. So that's something that's a bad signal. That's something that's a culture misfit for us. That's something that could definitely be avoided and shouldn't happen in the first place. So long story short, if you fail an interview, it's not necessarily your bad. You may be trying for specific terms, for specific, requirements, for salary range and so forth. Usually it doesn't matter. If your CV is intact, if, your portfolio is indeed legit, if you just act respectfully throughout the interview, you're going to get the role if you're a good fit, your expectations match, your salary needs match, and so forth. But otherwise, there may be 100 more candidates applying for interviews. So some of them may simply be more suitable. Some of them may actually be more experienced. Some of them may actually be just a better fit. And that doesn't make you failing the interview per se. It means that simply this specific interview failed. So don't give up. Keep pushing and make sure you spend the time for due diligence.